Rock Hudson's abandoned house, tragic death and net worth, the chiseled jawline that made women swoon, the magnetic charm that dominated the silver screen for decades. Rock Hudson embodied Hollywood's definition of the perfect leading man: tall, handsome, and irresistibly masculine. But behind that carefully crafted image lay secrets so profound they would eventually shock the world. As Hudson's life drew to its tragic close, the magnificent Beverly Hills mansion that once hosted Hollywood's elite stood eerily silent, its owner wasting away from a disease nobody dared name. The man who personified heterosexual romance on screen spent his final days isolated and emaciated, his truth finally exposed in death as it never could be in life. Today, we pull back the curtain on Rock Hudson's abandoned estate, the heartbreaking circumstances of his death that changed America forever, and the surprising financial legacy left behind by a star who lived two completely different lives, one in the spotlight and one in the shadows. The making of a Hollywood icon. Before he became Rock Hudson, he was Roy Harold Scherer Jr., born November 17, 1925, in Winnetka, Illinois. A handsome but unremarkable young man with extraordinary dreams. His transformation into one of Hollywood's most bankable stars represents one of the industry's most calculated and comprehensive makeovers. After a brief stint in the Navy during World War II, the tall, strikingly handsome young man moved to California with nothing but his good looks and ambition. Working as a truck driver, he sent photos to various studios, hoping to catch someone's attention. That someone turned out to be talent agent Henry Wilson, notorious for discovering and developing handsome young men for Hollywood, often in exchange for sexual favors. Henry Wilson specialized in creating masculine, marketable leading men from raw material, explained film historian Robert Hoffler. With Roy Scherer, he hit the jackpot. Here was a man with the physical attributes audiences craved, but he needed complete repackaging. Wilson immediately recognized the young man's potential and set about transforming him. First came the name Change. Rock for the solidity of his physique, Hudson for the majesty of the river. Then came extensive coaching, voice lessons to lower his naturally high-pitched voice, acting classes to develop his craft, and rigorous physical training to maintain his impressive physique. Most importantly, Wilson crafted an entirely fictional backstory and public persona to hide Hudson's homosexuality. Wilson created elaborate dates with starlets, planted stories in fan magazines, and established Rock as the ultimate ladies' man, revealed a former studio publicist. It was all fiction, but the public never questioned it. They saw what they were conditioned to see, a strapping, heterosexual dream. Universal Studios signed Hudson to a contract in 1949, and after a series of bit parts, he began his rise to prominence. His breakthrough came in the 1954 melodrama Magnificent Obsession, opposite Jane Wyman. The film's success established Hudson as a serious actor and a genuine box office draw. He followed this with a string of successful films, including All That Heaven Allows, Giant, which earned him his only Academy Award nomination, and Pillow Talk, the first of his beloved romantic comedies with Doris Day. By the late 1950s, Hudson had achieved something remarkable. He was simultaneously one of Hollywood's most popular romantic leads and a gay man living in an era of intense homophobia. The dichotomy between his public and private lives created immense psychological pressure that few could comprehend. Rock lived with the constant fear of exposure, said a close friend who requested anonymity. Every interview, every public appearance, every film premiere was an exercise in vigilance. One slip could end everything he'd worked for. Despite these pressures, Hudson's career flourished through the 1960s. As the studio system began to crumble, he successfully transitioned to television with the popular series Macmillan and Wife in the 1970s, remaining relevant long after many of his contemporaries had faded from view. Throughout it all, he maintained the careful facade that kept his true self hidden from the adoring public who thought they knew him intimately. The Beverly Hills estate, a sanctuary and showpiece. As Hudson's star rose in Hollywood, so did his need for a private sanctuary away from the constant scrutiny of public life. In 1962, at the height of his fame, he purchased what would become his most significant residence, a magnificent estate at 9402 Beverly Crest Drive in Beverly Hills. This property wasn't just a home, it was a statement of his success and a carefully designed space where he could occasionally let down the exhausting facade he maintained everywhere else. The Spanish-style mansion, originally built in the 1920s, spanned approximately 9,600 square feet on a sprawling 3-acre lot high in the exclusive Beverly Hills post office area. With its commanding views of Los Angeles and the Pacific Ocean beyond, the estate offered both luxury and the precious commodity Hudson valued most, privacy. Rock chose that property very deliberately, explained a longtime friend and frequent visitor. The long, winding driveway and strategic landscaping meant that no photographers could get a clear shot into the property. The high elevation and surrounding hills created a natural barrier against prying eyes. It was one of the few places he could truly be himself. The home's architecture featured classic Spanish colonial revival elements: white stucco walls, a red-tiled roof, graceful arches, and an interior courtyard with a fountain. Inside, Hudson created an environment that balanced masculine elegance with comfort. Dark wood beams crossed whitewashed ceilings, while large windows flooded rooms with California sunshine and framed the spectacular views. The decor reflected Rock's actual taste, not the image the studios created for him, recalled interior designer Michael Taylor, who worked with Hudson on the home. He had a sophisticated eye, mixing antiques with contemporary pieces, displaying art he genuinely appreciated rather than what was fashionable. The house was distinctly his, in a way his public persona never could be. The estate's crowning glory was its stunning outdoor space. A magnificent kidney-shaped swimming pool, surrounded by a flagstone deck, became the centerpiece for Hudson's legendary parties. Adjacent gardens featured lush landscaping with Mediterranean influences, olive trees, cypresses, and flowering plants that thrived in the Southern California climate. For nearly 2 decades, this estate served as the backdrop for Hudson's complex life. Here, he entertained Hollywood's elite, including close friends like Elizabeth Taylor, Carol Burnett, and frequent co-star Doris Day. These gatherings were carefully orchestrated affairs where Hudson maintained his public persona, with female dates on his arm, and carefully monitored alcohol consumption to avoid any revealing slips. But the same property hosted more private gatherings where Hudson could relax his guard among trusted friends. In these more intimate settings, a different Rock Hudson emerged, one who could acknowledge his authentic self away from the relentless pressure of public scrutiny. There were really 2 completely different types of parties at that house, revealed a regular guest who requested anonymity. The official parties, where Rock played the charming, flirtatious ladies' man for industry people, and the private gatherings where he could relax with people who knew the truth. It was like watching someone finally exhale after holding their breath all day. As the 1970s progressed, Hudson spent more time at the Beverly Hills estate. The property evolved with him, undergoing renovations that reflected changing tastes, and Hudson's desire for even more privacy as his fame from television brought a new generation of fans into his orbit. By the early 1980s, the estate had become more than just a home. It was a testament to Hudson's remarkable success at maintaining his dual lives. The man who could never publicly acknowledge his authentic self had created a space where, at least within its walls, he could occasionally experience the freedom to be himself. The shocking marriage that fooled America. In the carefully orchestrated fiction that was Rock Hudson's public life, perhaps no chapter was more calculated than his brief marriage to Phyllis Gates. What the American public perceived as a genuine romance was, in reality, one of Hollywood's most elaborate publicity stunts, a union specifically designed to silence growing rumors about Hudson's sexuality. By 1955, despite the studio system's best efforts to promote Hudson as the ultimate heterosexual heartthrob, whispers about his private life had begun to circulate in Hollywood. Henry Wilson, still orchestrating Hudson's career and image, determined that drastic measures were needed to protect his valuable client. The solution, a marriage of convenience with Wilson's own secretary, Phyllis Gates. The marriage was entirely Henry's creation, revealed a former Universal Pictures executive. He approached Phyllis directly, explaining that Rock needed a wife to secure his career. Whether she knew the full truth about Rock's sexuality remains debated, but she certainly understood this was a business arrangement more than a love match. Gates, a pretty petite woman from Minnesota, seemed the perfect candidate. As Wilson's secretary, she already understood the inner workings of Hollywood's publicity machine. She had interacted with Hudson professionally and could plausibly have developed a relationship with him. Most importantly, she was directly under Wilson's influence, making her unlikely to reveal the truth about the arrangement. The courtship was brief and thoroughly documented in fan magazines. After a whirlwind romance of just a few months, all carefully photographed and publicized, Hudson and Gates married on November 9, 1955. The ceremony at the Santa Barbara courthouse was small, but generated enormous media coverage, with Hudson portrayed as the dashing leading man who had finally found love. The publicity surrounding the wedding was intense, recalled a photographer who covered Hollywood during that era. Every magazine wanted the inside story. The studios made sure they got exactly the narrative they wanted. America's most eligible bachelor had finally been captured by a lucky young woman. The public ate it up completely. Life behind closed doors told a different story. The newlyweds moved into Hudson's house on Beverly Crest Drive, but according to friends, they maintained separate bedrooms from the beginning. Hudson continued his discreet relationships with men, while Gates found herself in the bizarre position of being a wife in name only to one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Phyllis's situation was uniquely difficult, explained a friend who knew the couple. She had to maintain the fiction of marital bliss in public while living with a man who had no romantic interest in her. Studio publicists wrote detailed accounts of their supposed honeymoon, their domestic happiness, even their plans for children, all complete fabrications. The marriage lasted just 3 years, ending in divorce in 1958. The official reason given was Gates's claim that Hudson had been mentally cruel, a common vague charge in an era when divorce was still somewhat scandalous. The truth was far more complex, involving recorded conversations and allegations that would have destroyed Hudson's career had they become public. There are indications that Gates eventually hired a private investigator and confronted Hudson about his homosexuality, revealed biographer Sarah Davidson. Transcripts suggest she directly asked him about his sexuality and challenged him about his relationships with men. Whether this was genuine shock or an effort to secure a better divorce settlement remains unclear. What is clear is that the divorce was handled with the same careful management as the marriage itself. Hudson paid Gates a settlement of $250, equivalent to about $2,500 today, and she signed confidentiality agreements that prevented her from revealing the truth. Universal Studios publicists immediately went to work crafting the narrative of Hudson as the disappointed husband whose work commitments had strained the marriage beyond repair. After the divorce, the studio publicity machine portrayed Rock as the eligible bachelor once again, said a former studio publicist. The narrative became that he was so dedicated to his craft that marriage had proven too difficult. It actually enhanced his appeal to female fans who believed they might succeed where Phyllis had failed. The marriage, while brief, accomplished its primary purpose. It quelled rumors about Hudson's sexuality at a crucial moment in his career and maintained his viability as a romantic lead. He would never marry again, instead relying on carefully arranged dates with female co-stars and friends for public appearances, while keeping his private life strictly segregated from his public image. Gates herself largely disappeared from public view after the divorce, working as a successful interior decorator until her death in 2006. In her later years, she maintained that she had genuinely loved Hudson and had been unaware of his homosexuality when they married, a claim many close to the situation found difficult to believe given her proximity to Wilson and the Hollywood system. The marriage of Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates stands as perhaps the most stark example of how far Hollywood would go to maintain profitable fictions, creating an elaborate charade of domestic bliss for a public unwilling to accept their beloved leading man as he truly was. The diagnosis that changed America. In late June 1984, Rock Hudson appeared at a press event promoting the upcoming season of Dynasty, the popular primetime soap opera he had joined as a guest star. Reporters and colleagues were shocked by his appearance. The once robust leading man was gaunt, visibly ill, and seemed to have aged decades since his last public appearance. Studio publicists quickly attributed his condition to liver problems and claimed he was recovering from anorexia stemming from recent surgery. The truth was far more devastating. Hudson had been diagnosed with AIDS, a disease that in 1984 was still shrouded in fear, misinformation, and profound stigma. His condition represented a crisis that threatened to expose both his homosexuality and the elaborate fiction he had maintained throughout his career. When Rock received his diagnosis, he was paralyzed with fear, not just of dying, but of the public learning the truth, revealed his personal physician, who requested anonymity. Remember, in 1984, AIDS was still widely considered a gay disease. There was no way for him to acknowledge his condition without simultaneously revealing his sexuality. Hudson initially attempted to manage his illness in absolute secrecy, seeking experimental treatments while maintaining his professional commitments. He traveled to Paris in July 1985 to consult with doctors at the Pasteur Institute about HPA-23, an experimental drug not available in the United States. His condition deteriorated rapidly during this trip, leading to a collapse at the Ritz Hotel. What followed was the moment that changed both Hudson's life and America's understanding of AIDS. Unable to maintain the charade any longer, on July 25, 1985, Hudson's publicist released a statement confirming that the actor had AIDS. The announcement sent shockwaves through Hollywood and across America. "It's impossible to overstate the impact of that announcement," explained Dr. Michael Gottlieb, one of the first physicians to identify AIDS. Suddenly, AIDS had a familiar, beloved face. Rock Hudson wasn't a stereotype or a statistic. He was someone Americans had invited into their living rooms for decades. It humanized the epidemic in a way nothing else had. Hudson was transferred back to the United States, admitted to UCLA Medical Center, where his condition continued to deteriorate. Images of the once vital actor, now skeletal, his trademark handsome features ravaged by Kaposi's sarcoma, appeared in newspapers and magazines worldwide. For the first time, many Americans confronted the reality of AIDS through someone they felt they knew. As Hudson battled for his life in the hospital, his Beverly Crest Drive estate stood empty, a poignant symbol of the dual life he could no longer maintain. The home that had been both sanctuary and stage for his carefully managed public persona was now silent, its owner never to return. The impact of Hudson's diagnosis extended far beyond his personal tragedy. His former co-star and close friend Elizabeth Taylor immediately mobilized, helping establish the American Foundation for AIDS Research, AMFAR, and becoming one of the earliest and most vocal Hollywood advocates for AIDS research and compassion for those affected. Rock's illness transformed Liz, recalled a mutual friend. She was devastated watching him suffer, but she channeled that grief into action. She often said that his greatest legacy wasn't his films, but how his illness woke America up to the AIDS crisis. Perhaps most touching was the response from Hudson's frequent co-star, Doris Day. Despite the romantic chemistry they had portrayed on screen being entirely fictional, Day demonstrated genuine affection for Hudson. When she learned of his illness, she invited him to appear on her television show, Doris Day's Best Friends, in July 1985. It would be Hudson's final public appearance, a shocking revelation of his condition to viewers who remembered him as the picture of health and vitality. Doris knew how sick he was, but she wanted to give him that moment of dignity, said a production assistant who worked on the show. She treated him with such gentleness and respect. When cameras stopped rolling, she held his hand and told him how brave he was. There wasn't a dry eye in the studio. On October 2nd, 1985, Rock Hudson died in his sleep at his Beverly Hills home on Castell Drive, not his beloved estate, but a smaller residence where he had moved to receive care during his final days. He was 59 years old. The cause of death was listed as AIDS-related complications, marking the first major celebrity death from a disease that would go on to claim hundreds of thousands of American lives. The abandoned estate and financial legacy. As Rock Hudson took his final breaths in a different Beverly Hills residence, his beloved estate on Beverly Crest Drive stood empty, a magnificent property suddenly devoid of the vibrant presence that had animated it for over 2 decades. In the months following his death, the abandoned mansion became a physical embodiment of the void left by Hudson's passing and a testament to the complicated legacy of a man who lived 2 entirely separate lives. The estate was in limbo after Rock died, explained real estate agent Jeffrey Hyland, who later handled the property. There was something deeply poignant about this beautiful home sitting empty, while its owner's death was generating headlines worldwide. It was as if the property itself was holding Hudson's secrets. The fate of the estate was determined by Hudson's will, a document that provided final insights into the actor's priorities and relationships, but also sparked significant legal controversy. Contrary to Hudson's earlier intentions, Tom Clark, once named as a beneficiary, had been removed from the final will. This change, along with other complications in the estate planning, led to a highly publicized lawsuit from Mark Christian, Hudson's former lover, who claimed he had been deliberately excluded and exposed to HIV without his knowledge. Rock's will became a battleground that exposed the very private life he had tried to keep hidden, revealed an attorney familiar with the estate. The legal challenges that followed his death brought to light relationships and conflicts that would have horrified Hudson, who had spent decades carefully managing his public image. The Beverly Crest property itself, worth approximately $2.5 million in 1985, was sold in 1986. The proceeds became part of the Hudson estate and were distributed according to the final court settlements rather than his original wishes. Subsequent owners have renovated and expanded the property over the years, though they've maintained many of its distinctive Spanish colonial revival features. Each owner has put their stamp on the property, but its bones remain Hudson's, said an architect who worked on a later renovation. The basic layout, the relationship to the views, the sense of privacy and sanctuary, those elements have survived through multiple owners and renovations. Hudson's net worth at the time of his death revealed a man who, despite his extraordinary fame, had not accumulated the vast fortune one might expect from a career spanning 3 decades at the top of Hollywood. His estate was valued at approximately $8 million, a substantial sum in 1985, but modest compared to contemporaries like Elizabeth Taylor or Paul Newman. Rock lived well, but not excessively, explained his former business manager. He invested in real estate, art, and some conservative stocks, but he wasn't particularly interested in amassing huge wealth. He spent on things that mattered to him: his homes, travel, entertaining friends. His financial priorities reflected his desire for comfort and security rather than ostentation. The most significant portion of Hudson's estate went to establish the Rock Hudson AIDS Foundation, which later merged with AmFAR to continue the fight against the disease that claimed his life. This final act of philanthropy transformed the personal tragedy of his illness into a force for positive change, funding research and support services at a time when government response to the epidemic remained inadequate. It was his final rebuke to the system that had forced him to live in secrecy, said a close friend. By acknowledging the disease that killed him and directing his resources to fight it, he made a statement he couldn't make while alive. In the years following Hudson's death, the property on Beverly Crest Drive has changed hands multiple times, most recently selling for over $20 million. While the connection to Hudson has faded somewhat in public memory, the estate remains part of the tapestry of Hollywood history, a beautiful home that once sheltered one of the industry's most closely guarded secrets. The story of Rock Hudson's final years reveals the painful collision of private truth and public fiction that defined his entire career. As AIDS ravaged his body, the carefully constructed image he had maintained for decades crumbled, forcing America to confront not only the reality of a devastating epidemic, but also the culture of deception that had compelled one of its biggest stars to live a lie. Hudson's death represented a pivotal moment in American cultural history, explained LGBTQ historian Daniel Harris. It marked the beginning of the end of an era when homosexuality was so stigmatized that someone would construct an entire false life rather than acknowledge their true self. His illness forced a national conversation about both AIDS and the conditions that drove him to such elaborate deception. The abandoned Beverly Hills estate, with its empty rooms and silent pool, became a powerful symbol of this cultural transition, a physical space that had once accommodated both Hudson's authentic self and his public persona, now standing vacant as those two worlds finally, tragically converged in his dying days. In the decades since Hudson's death, his legacy has evolved from that of simply a handsome leading man to something far more significant. The revelation of his homosexuality and his status as the first major celebrity to die of AIDS transformed him into an unwitting but crucial figure in LGBTQ history and AIDS awareness. Hudson never chose to be an activist or a symbol, noted AIDS historian Sarah Schulman, but his death accomplished what he could never do in life. It humanized both gay people and people with AIDS for mainstream America in a way that was unprecedented. The magnificent estate that once provided both sanctuary and stage for Hudson's complex life has long since passed to new owners, renovated and updated for different lives and different times. Yet it remains a silent witness to a Hollywood era when image was everything, and the gap between public perception and private reality could be vast and painful. Today, the property stands as a testament to how much has changed and how much hasn't in the years since Hudson's death. While LGBTQ actors can now live openly in ways Hudson never could, the pressure to project certain images and conform to marketable ideals remains a powerful force in Hollywood. Rock Hudson's journey from abandoned estate to tragic death reveals a man caught between worlds, the fiction Hollywood created and the reality he could never publicly acknowledge. His impressive net worth, carefully managed image, and the magnificent Beverly Hills sanctuary where he occasionally let his guard down tell a story far more compelling than any film he ever made, one about the human cost of living a divided life. The empty mansion he left behind, with its spectacular views and silent rooms, serves as a poignant reminder of both what he achieved and what he sacrificed. In death, Hudson finally integrated the two halves of his life that he had kept so carefully separated, becoming in many ways more significant as a symbol than he had been as a star. If you found this look behind Hollywood's carefully constructed facades fascinating, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more untold stories from entertainment history. We're dedicated to revealing the hidden truths behind the celebrities whose images shaped American culture. Were you surprised by any aspects of Rock Hudson's private life? Did you know about the impact his illness had on America's response to the AIDS crisis? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and remember, in Hollywood, the most compelling dramas have always been the ones playing out when the cameras stopped rolling. We'll see you in our next video exploring the secret history of cinema's greatest stars.